Why you must never answer when you hear your name at midnight. The last thing Amara ever said was his own name. He whispered it into the dark, into the silence that had no bottom. And something on the other side of that darkness heard him. Something that had been waiting. This is not a story about ghosts. Not exactly. It is older than that. Older than the words we use to describe things we cannot explain. It is the kind of story that grandmothers tell in lowered voices, in the last hour before sleep, when the fire has burned down to embers and the shadows in the corner have grown too long to look at directly. It is a story about a rule. A simple rule. One that every child in the village of Kisuru knew before they knew how to write their own name. Never answer when you hear your name called after midnight. Not ever. Not even if the voice sounds exactly like someone you love. Especially then. Amara came back to Kisuru on a Thursday in the dry season. The red dust of the highland roads coated his shoes by the time the matatu dropped him at the crossroads 2 kilometers from the village. He carried a single bag, a navy blue duffel, worn at the handles, with a broken zipper held together by a safety pin. It was not much to show for 5 years in the city. But then again, Amara had not gone to the city to gather things. He had gone to escape the feeling that Kisuru was slowly swallowing him alive. He had not planned to come back. Not so soon. Not like this. His father had died 3 weeks earlier. A quiet death, they said. He simply did not wake up one morning. His mother had found him at first light, still lying in the exact position he had settled into the night before, hands folded across his chest like a man who had decided, deliberately, privately, that he was finished. Amara had received the news by phone, standing outside a supermarket in the city, holding a plastic bag of groceries he would later leave on a stranger's doorstep without quite knowing why. He had not cried immediately. He had just stood there in the noise and exhaust fumes of the street, feeling the world continue its relentless motion all around him, and thought, I should have called him more. He had last spoken to his father 4 months before his death. Kisuru received him the way it always did, with a smell of wood smoke and wet earth, with the sound of children whose voices carried further than made any physical sense, with a particular quality of afternoon light in the highlands that turned everything gold and slightly unreal. His mother met him at the gate of the compound. She was shorter than he remembered. Or perhaps he had simply forgotten how small she was, how much largeness she had always managed to project. She held him for a long time. Neither of them said anything important. The house was the same. His childhood bedroom still had the faded poster of a footballer on the wall, sun-bleached to near illegibility. The bed still dipped in the middle. The window still rattled in its frame when the evening wind came down from the ridge. Kisuru was, by any ordinary measure, a peaceful place. There were perhaps 400 people. A small market that operated on Tuesdays and Saturdays. A primary school painted blue and white. A church with a rusted iron roof that sang in the rain. A clinic staffed by a nurse named Beatrice who had been there so long she had become part of the landscape, inseparable from it, like the mango trees and the ant hills. For the first week, Amara occupied himself with practical things. He helped settle the paperwork his father had left in mild disorder. He received visitors who came to offer condolences and eat and remember out loud. He sat with his mother in the evenings on the veranda, and they talked about everything except the one thing that pressed heaviest on both of them. He told himself he was doing well. He slept. He ate. He watched the sun rise over the ridge every morning and thought about returning to the city and his apartment and his ordinary life. He did not return. Something kept him. He could not have named it precisely. It felt like unfinished business, but he could not identify what business remained unfinished. His father was buried. The paperwork was in order. His mother had neighbors and a sister in the next town who visited every Sunday. There was no logical reason to stay. He stayed. It was on the 8th night that he first heard it. He had been asleep. Deeply, completely asleep, the dreamless kind that comes from exhaustion and grief. When something pulled him up through the dark layers of unconsciousness and deposited him, suddenly and absolutely awake, in the silence of his bedroom. The kind of silence that has a texture. He lay still and listened. The window was rattling slightly. A dog somewhere in the village was making the low, uncertain sound dogs make when they are unsettled but cannot identify the source of their unease. The breeze moved through the dry grass on the slope behind the house with a sound like whispering. Then he heard it. His name. Spoken once, from somewhere outside. A voice, low, clear, and terribly familiar, saying his name the way only one person had ever said it. With the particular emphasis on the second syllable. The slight elongation at the end. The way it curved upward, almost into a question, as if whoever was calling him was simultaneously certain and uncertain that he would answer. It was his father's voice. Amara sat up in bed. His heart was loud in his ears. He looked at the window. There was nothing beyond it but darkness and the moving shapes of the trees. He looked at the clock on his phone. It read 12:07 a.m. He told himself he had been dreaming. He told himself this so quickly, so decisively, that he almost believed it. Almost. Because the thing about dreaming is that by the time you are fully awake, the dream has already begun to dissolve at the edges. It becomes uncertain, soft, deniable. But this had not dissolved. He could still hear exactly how the voice had shaped his name. He could still feel the vibration of it, as if the sound had not just entered through his ears but had moved through the walls and the floor and the bones of the house itself. He lay back down. He did not sleep again until the sky began to gray in the east. He said nothing about it in the morning. He drank his tea and watched his mother move around the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone who has organized their grief into the architecture of daily routine, and he decided that it had been a dream. A natural thing. A mind doing its work, processing loss in the only language available to it. He was almost entirely convinced. On the 11th night, it happened again. This time he was not asleep. He was sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark, unable to sleep, scrolling through old photographs on his phone. He had found one of his father standing outside this very house, squinting against the sun, mid-sentence, caught in the middle of saying something that had been forgotten by everyone who heard it. His father had hated having his photograph taken. He always said the camera stole something from you. Not your soul, he had clarified. He was a practical man who did not traffic in that kind of language. But something. Your stillness, maybe. Your right to be unlookable. Amara had been staring at this photograph for perhaps 10 minutes when the sound came again. His name. The same voice. The same pronunciation. But this time it was not just once. It came twice in quick succession, with a small pause between them, the way you call someone who hasn't heard you the first time. Patient. Insistent. Sure. Amara stood. He moved to the window without making a decision to do so, his body moving before his mind had caught up. He pressed his face close to the glass and looked out into the dark. The compound was empty. The gate was closed. The shapes of the trees on the slope were still and dark against the star-heavy sky. Nothing moved. He noticed two things. First, the dog, the one that had been unsettled before, was completely silent tonight. Not absent. He could see it from the window, curled beside the storage shed. Awake. Its head up, its ears forward. Staring directly at the gate. Not making a sound. Second, the temperature in the room had dropped. Not dramatically. Not the theatrical cold of horror stories. Just a degree or two. Enough to make the skin on his arms rise. He stayed at the window for a long time. Nothing else came. In the morning, he finally mentioned it to his mother. Casually. He framed it as a question about the neighbors. Did anyone have a habit of calling for people at night? Some of the older men sometimes came home late from the drinking place. Maybe sound carried strangely from the road. His mother set down her cup. She looked at him for a moment that was one moment too long. "What did you hear?" she asked. "Not what did you think you heard. Not you were probably dreaming. What did you hear?" He told her. The voice. The name. The timing. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, simply, "Do not answer it." "What?" "Whatever calls your name after midnight. Do not answer it. Do not go to the window. Do not go outside. Do not say anything at all." She picked up her cup again. "Your grandmother told me the same thing when I was young. I am telling you now." "But what is it?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not the shake of someone who doesn't know. The shake of someone who has decided not to say." He went to find old Mwangi that afternoon. Mwangi was the oldest person in Kisuru, or at least the oldest whose age could be approximately calculated. He lived alone in a house at the far edge of the village, near the beginning of the ridge path, in a compound so overgrown with plants it looked as if the forest were in the slow process of reclaiming him. He sat outside most days under the same acacia tree, in a chair that was more rope than wood, watching the middle distance with the alert, unhurried focus of someone who is watching something you cannot see. He had known Amara's father, had known his grandfather, had been here when the village was only a handful of families, and the ridge above them was still considered dangerous land. Amara sat across from him and told him what had happened. All of it, this time. The voice, the clock, the dog, the cold. Mwangi listened without interrupting. When Amara finished, the old man was quiet for a long time. He looked at the ridgeline. He rubbed his thumb and forefinger together in a slow, habitual motion that meant he was arranging his thoughts. "There are things," Mwangi said finally, "that travel at night. They are not always evil things. Some of them are simply lost. Some of them are looking for a way back. Some of them are looking for someone they knew, or someone whose face reminds them of someone they knew. They move in the hours when the boundary is thin. You know what I mean by the boundary?" Amara shook his head. "There are hours in the night when what is on one side and what is on the other side are very close together. Like two pages of a book held up to the light. You can almost read through one to the other. Midnight is such a time. The hour before dawn is another. In those hours, things can hear you. And if they hear your name from your own mouth, your own voice, your own breath giving them the sound of who you are, then they have something to hold. Do you understand? They have a key." "But I haven't answered," Amara said. "I haven't said anything." "Good." The old man looked at him directly. "Don't." "But whose voice is it? Is it?" He stopped. Mwangi waited. "Is it my father?" The old man's expression did not change. But something shifted behind his eyes. A careful quality. The look of someone choosing their words with the precision of a surgeon choosing an instrument. "The voice of someone you know," he said, "is the most convincing voice there is. That is why they use it. That is the whole point. They go into your memories, your grief, your love, the things you are still carrying, and they put on those voices the way you put on a coat. It keeps them warm. It keeps them close. But it is not that person. Whatever that person was, whatever they meant to you, that is not them. Then what is it?" A long pause. The wind moved through the acacia above them. "Something that wants to be seen," Mwangi said. "Something that wants to be acknowledged. When you answer a name, when you say yes, I am here, I hear you, you are doing more than speaking. You are opening a door. You are saying, come in. And whatever is waiting on the other side of that call will come in. Through your mouth. Through the space your voice creates. And once it is in, he shook his head. It is very hard to make it leave. Amara drove home slowly. He sat in the compound for a while before going inside. He told himself he was not afraid. He was, of course, completely terrified. But he had been raised in a culture that understood the difference between being afraid and being consumed by fear. Being afraid was simply correct information. It meant your body understood the situation more clearly than your mind wanted to admit. You thanked your body for the information. And then you made a decision. His decision was simple. He would not answer. Whatever came. However many times. However familiar the voice. He would not say a word. On the 14th night, the voice came 4 times. It began at 12:03. His name, once. Soft, distant, coming from the direction of the gate, or perhaps the ridge beyond the gate. He was already awake, lying in the dark with his eyes open, having abandoned any pretense of sleep around 11. He heard it and stayed still. He breathed slowly and deliberately, the way his grandmother had once taught him to breathe during a thunderstorm. In through the nose, out through the mouth, long and even, until your body remembers that storms pass. The second call came at 12:18. Closer. Not dramatically closer. But the volume had changed in a way that was not simply about proximity. It was more as if the voice had found a better angle. As if it had been circling the house and had located the place where the sound carried best. Amara. The name stretched slightly on the last syllable. A tiny pull. A tiny question. He did not move. The third time, at 12:31, the voice was right outside the window. Not the gate. Not the compound. The window. 3 meters from where he lay. He kept his eyes on the ceiling. He made his breath long and even. He thought about his grandmother. He thought about the way she used to sit in the dark without any fear at all, her hands loose in her lap, her face peaceful, watching the night with the simple attentiveness of someone who had made a long peace with everything it contained. He thought about her hands. He thought about her hands very deliberately, because thinking about her hands was something to hold on to, and he needed something to hold on to, because the voice outside his window was saying his name in a way that he had not heard since he was 7 years old, when he had woken from a nightmare and his father had come into the room and sat on the edge of the bed and said his name exactly like that exact gentle curve of sound, that exact particular warmth, to tell him that it was all right, that it was only a dream, that he was here. He pressed his back teeth together. He did not make a sound. There was a long silence after the third call. Minutes that felt like something heavier than time. He thought it might be over. He let himself think that it might be over. Then the fourth call came. It did not say his name. It said, "I know you're awake." In his father's voice. Perfectly. Exactly. With a slight hoarseness that had developed in his father's later years, the warmth beneath the words, the particular rhythm of his speech, the thing you cannot learn and cannot fake, the signature of a human voice built across decades of a specific life lived in a specific place. Amara stopped breathing. "I just want to talk," the voice said. "Just come to the window. Just for a minute. I'm not going anywhere." He stayed absolutely still. "Amara. It's me. You know it's me. You can hear it is me." He squeezed his eyes shut. He pressed his lips together until they ached. The silence that followed was the longest of his life. It had a weight to it. It pressed down on the house, on the room, on his chest. The dog outside was silent. The trees were silent. The entire village seemed to be holding a breath it did not know it was holding. Then, from directly beside his ear, not outside, not through the window glass, but right there, right at his ear, close enough that he could feel a displacement of air, a subtle wrongness in the space beside his head, the voice said, very quietly, "You've gotten so tall. That was the thing his father always said when he came home. Always. Every single time, regardless of how long he'd been gone, regardless of the fact that Amara had stopped growing at 22. He would look at his son and say that, as if Amara were still in the process of becoming, as if there were always more height still to come, as if the growing were never really finished. He had said it the last time Amara had visited. He had probably been planning to say it the next time too. There was no next time. Amara felt his throat tighten. He felt the tears arrive without permission, the way grief sometimes comes, not gradually but suddenly, fully formed, as if it has been waiting just off stage. And with the grief came something dangerous. A wavering. A moment of terrible and complete uncertainty about what Mwangi had said, about what his mother had said, about the rule that every child in Kisuru knew before they could spell their own name. Because what if they were wrong? What if this was actually his father? What if the old man who did not wake up one morning had found some way back? Not to stay, just to say something he hadn't gotten to say. What if the rule was not wisdom but fear? What if following the rule meant losing this, losing the last chance to hear that voice say one real thing? He put his hand over his mouth. He held it there. He did not answer. By 1:15 a.m., the presence, whatever it was gone. He could feel its absence the way you feel the absence of a sound that has been playing so long you stopped hearing it. A sudden change in the texture of the silence, a restoration of something natural. He lay in the dark for the rest of the night and did not sleep. On the 16th night, he broke. He broke the way most things break. Not dramatically, not all at once, but at the end of a slow accumulation. He had slept perhaps 10 hours in the last 3 days. His mother had started watching him with the particular stillness of someone who is trying to decide whether to speak. He had called Mwangi twice and gotten no answer. He had sat in the compound in the afternoons trying to read and found that the words did not connect to anything, that his mind kept drifting back to the same place, the same sound, the same specific phrase, "You've gotten so tall," and what it meant that he could hear it so exactly, so precisely in every detail. He had spent 16 days in Kisuru. He had barely slept. He had stopped eating properly. He had not cried for his father, not really, not the full, terrible, necessary kind of crying that grief demands. He had held it at arm's length because he was holding everything at arm's length. Because if he let himself fully feel the thing he was feeling, he did not know what he would do. And now the voice was back. 12:01 a.m. His name. 12:09. His name again. 12:17. The question, "Are you there?" 12:24. Nothing. A silence longer than usual. He thought again that it had passed. He stood from the bed and walked to the window and looked out at the dark compound, the empty gate, the still trees, the stars. His hand was already on the window latch. What he would later try to explain to himself, in the weeks and months after, in the slow process of reconstruction, was that it did not feel like a decision. It felt like something releasing. Like a wire that had been pulled too tight for too long finally snapping. He did not choose to open the window. He opened the window. The night air came in cold and clean. He leaned his elbows on the sill and looked out. The compound was empty. The gate was closed. The moonlight lay flat and silver on the red earth. And then the voice came, from everywhere and nowhere, from the dark and from the air and from somewhere very slightly behind his own ears, and it said his name one final time, and there was a quality in it now that he could not name, a quality that had not been there before, something that was not quite warmth and not quite hunger but sat somewhere between the two, and the voice waited, and the night waited, and the silence waited, and Amara, exhausted and grieving and no longer certain of anything, opened his mouth and spoke. "I'm here," he said. 2 words. Barely above a whisper. His own voice, the voice that had been shaped by the same life and love and loss as his father's, the voice that carried the same rhythms, the same home in its vowels, the same place in its consonants. He said, "I'm here." And the night answered. Not with his father's voice. With his own. What came back from the darkness was his own voice. Exactly. Not an echo. An echo diminishes. An echo is a copy made of loss. This was not diminished. This was full and clear and entirely itself. The voice of a man standing in the room behind him, saying "I'm here" the way someone says it when they have been waiting a very long time to hear those words. Amara spun around. The room was empty. But something was different. Something had changed in the room, in the air of it, in the quality of the dark. There was a new weight. Not heavy. Not threatening. Just there. The way a room feels when someone has just left it. The impression of presence in the molecules of the air. He stood very still. "Hello," he said. His voice came out perfectly normally. That was the first thing that confused him, because he had expected to feel something. He had expected the cold, the dread, the supernatural electricity of the stories. Instead there was just the room, the rattling window, the faded footballer poster, the dip in the middle of the bed. He checked every corner. He checked the door, which was still latched. He checked under the bed, feeling slightly ridiculous, and found only dust and an old sandal he'd lost in secondary school. Nothing. He sat on the edge of the bed and tried to make sense of it. His heartbeat was slowing. His hands were trembling slightly but not catastrophically. He had answered. He had broken the rule. And nothing had happened. He was still here. The room was still the room. The night was still the night. He thought, maybe the old people were wrong. Maybe it was only superstition. Maybe he'd spent 2 weeks terrorizing himself over nothing, over the ordinary way that grief works on a mind already worn thin by loss and sleeplessness, and the only thing he'd done by finally answering was release the pressure. Say the word. Let it go. He thought this very clearly. And then he looked at the window. His reflection was in the glass. Except his reflection was not doing what he was doing. He was sitting still on the bed, hands in his lap. The reflection in the dark glass was standing. Standing at the window. Looking out into the compound with its hands at its sides, and its head slightly tilted, and the particular quality of stillness that belongs to things that are watching rather than things that are waiting. The reflection turned its head. It looked directly at him. And it smiled. Not a terrible smile. Not the smile of horror movies, the rictus grin, the teeth-only smile of something pretending. This was a small, private, almost regretful smile. The smile of someone who has found what they were looking for and is not entirely sure they are glad to have found it. Amara did not move. The reflection held his gaze for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Then it turned back toward the dark of the compound. Then it walked into the glass. Walked into it, through it, out of it, into the darkness on the other side. And then it was gone. And there was only Amara's reflection in the glass, sitting on the bed, hands in his lap, looking exactly as it should. Exactly as he looked. He reached up and touched his face. His cheek was cold. Not the skin cold of a cool night. Cold the way water is cold after it has been sitting somewhere deep and dark for a long time. In the morning he went to his mother. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and looked at his hands and told her what had happened. All of it. He did not leave anything out this time. She listened. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she got up and walked to the corner of the kitchen where a small shelf held objects that were not decorative, a black stone, a small bundle of dried herbs, a glass bottle with something dark inside it, objects she had never explained and he had learned not to ask about. She took the black stone and placed it at the threshold of his bedroom door. "What did you feel?" she asked. "After you answered?" He thought about it. "Nothing," he said. "That was the strange thing. I felt nothing. She nodded, slowly. That is the point, she said quietly. That is what they take. Not your breath, not your name on their tongue. Just that. Just the nothing. A small piece of what is supposed to be there. A small gap. You will not notice it right away. You will think everything is the same. But things will seem slightly further away. Things you love. Things that used to feel warm. They will still be there. You will still see them. But there will be a new distance. A thin glass between you and everything. He thought about the smile in the window. He thought about walking into the dark. Can you get it back? He asked. She was quiet for a long moment. She placed her hand briefly on his shoulder, warm and firm and real. You go to Mwangi today, she said. Not, I don't know. Not, I'm not sure. You go to Mwangi today. He went. Mwangi was waiting for him. That was the precise impression he had, that the old man had been expecting him, that the visit was already part of a sequence of events whose shape Mwangi could see more clearly than Amara could. He was sitting under the acacia with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes on the ridgeline, and he looked at Amara when he arrived with a look that was not surprise. Amara sat down. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, I answered it. Mwangi closed his eyes briefly. I know. You know. The dogs knew last night. They were silent in a way I have not heard in a long time. He opened his eyes. You saw something. In the window. My own reflection. But it walked away. The old man was still for a very long time. The wind moved through the acacia. Somewhere down the slope a child was singing a song that Amara half recognized, the melody just at the edge of meaning. There is something you must understand, Mwangi said finally. About what uses voices like that. About why it used your father's voice. It is not random. It knows you. It has been in the places where you keep things, the old things, the childhood things, the things you have not spoken out loud in years. It found the voice that would wear down your resistance. It tried them all first. It started with distance, it moved to closeness, and finally it found the thing you could not resist. That one specific phrase. The one your father always said. It found that in you, in the part of you that has not finished grieving, and it used it like a key. Amara felt something shift behind his eyes. The precision of this. The terrible, intimate precision. How? He asked. How does it know those things? Because those things are in you, Mwangi said simply. It does not need to break in from the outside. It has always been at the edges of you. Of all of us. That is where it waits. At the edge. Listening for the moment when the distance between what you hope and what you know grows thin enough for something to slip through. He paused. He turned and looked directly at Amara. The part of you that it took, he said, is small. You will be all right. But I want you to do something. I want you to do it today, before the day is done. What? Cry for your father, the old man said. Not unkindly. With a directness that was, in its own way, gentle. The real crying. The kind you have been holding back since the phone call in the city. The kind that is full and ugly and makes no sense and says everything that has no words. Do that. Because the thing that found you in the space of what you were not allowing yourself to feel. When you fill that space with what belongs in it, with the grief that is yours, that was always yours, there is no room for anything else. Amara sat under the acacia with the old man for another hour. They did not speak much. The wind came down from the ridge. The child's song drifted up from the valley. He went back to his mother's house. He sat at the kitchen table. He looked at the photograph of his father, the one where his father was mid-sentence, squinting into the sun, caught in the middle of saying something nobody remembered anymore, and he let it happen. He let the whole thing happen. The full weight of it. The 5 years of distance and 4 months of silence and the grocery bag left on a stranger's doorstep and the fact that there was no next time, there had never been going to be a next time, and still he had let the months pass as if time were something you could afford to be careless with. He cried until he couldn't, and then a little more. His mother sat with him and did not say anything, and that was exactly right. When it was over, he felt not better exactly. Grief doesn't leave. It doesn't resolve into something clean and finished. It settles. It finds its place in you, takes its shape around the shape of the person who is gone, and becomes part of the architecture of who you are. He felt, more accurately, like himself again. Like the version of himself that had edges and weight and temperature. Like the glass between him and the world was gone. He stayed in Kisuru 2 more weeks. He helped his mother plant new beans in the garden. He walked the ridge with Mwangi one afternoon and looked down at the village from above, all its smoke and its noise and its ordinary, irreplaceable life. He called old friends. He ate properly. He slept. He left on a Monday, the same red dust on his shoes, the same navy duffel with a broken zipper. His mother stood at the gate and held him for a long time. She pressed a black stone into his hand as he turned to leave. Smooth, flat, warm from her palm. "What is this for?" he asked. "For the nights," she said. "You will not need it. But it is good to have something real to hold." He kept it in his pocket. He kept it for a long time. He did not hear his name again at midnight. Not that month. Not that year. Not in the ways that mattered. But there are certain nights, in the quiet hours, in the particular stillness that comes after 12, when something changes very slightly in the air. When the quality of silence shifts. When, if you are very still and very honest with yourself, you can feel it. The edge of something. The thin place. The almost boundary between what you can see and what is there regardless. On those nights, Amara would hold the stone his mother had given him. He would breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth, long and even. He would think about his grandmother's hands. He would let the silence be silence and ask nothing of it. And he would say nothing. Nothing at all. Because somewhere between midnight and the first breath of dawn, something is always listening. And the truest thing the elders ever said, the thing they said in low voices, by the last light of dying fires, in the hour when even the bravest of them moved a little closer to the warmth, is this. The dead do not call your name. Only the things that are pretending to be dead do that. And they already know your answer. They are just waiting for you to say it out loud.